Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Friday, July 17th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. Today I'm joined by Tony Gerdeman. He's the lead beat writer for Buckeye Scoop. He's also the host of the Buckeye Weekly podcast. And it seems like we've talked a lot about everything being done right now to try and make a 2020 football season happen, but that is, once again, the big story today. The NCAA released an updated set of guidelines for schools as they start working toward a season. Before we dive into what that document said, Tony, did reading through it make you feel more or less optimistic about the chances of a 2020 football season?
It makes me feel more optimistic because there is now a larger voice talking about how to make this season happen rather than, I wouldn't say random athletic directors and conference commissioners almost operating as warlords. There's now like this overarching voice of governance suggesting how we implement tests and how we take care of everything and just how we move forward. So for me, I think that's a positive step, as opposed to if the NCAA were to just like walk away and not be part of this whole thing and be like, this is on you guys. We don't want anything to do with this. I think it's positive that they are getting involved, even as we all have our various opinions on the NCAA. But it is good that there is a larger voice in the room now.
Yeah, and it's worth just noting that the NCAA does not have oversight over this kind of stuff. This is stuff that is ultimately going to get decided at the conference level, probably. A lot of the stuff in that document that was released is could, should, sort of best practices, but is not, this is not an order that they can enforce with these schools. The NCAA's chief medical officer was quoted in the news release about this saying, any recommendation on a pathway toward a safe return to sport will depend on the national trajectory of COVID-19 spread. The idea of sport socialization is predicated on a scenario of reduced or flattened infection rates. And that was in the same release, accompanied by a graph showing the rates of the U.S. dropping alongside those from other countries from April to June or so. And then while Europe and Canada and Japan all continue to drop, the U.S. kind of bounced right back up starting in May-June. The pessimistic view there would be that trend is going in exactly the wrong direction right now for what the NCAA's chief medical officer is looking for. The more optimistic view is that it's probably forcing people to take more precautions and could set things back in the right direction in a few weeks if everyone kind of takes those recommended steps. Can you run through some of the precautions that the NCAA is recommending schools take?
Yeah, I think the big one is testing. And they want schools to be testing 72 hours within a competition, before a competition, and for the high contact risk sports, which football and basketball would be a part of. Obviously, the daily health checks, self-health checks of the players themselves. Anytime they're going into a building, they're being checked out, temperature checks, the continuance of the physical distancing, masks everywhere, wherever you are. Basically, if you're in a building, you should be wearing masks. If possible, all practice should be outside. If you have to practice inside, do it in a well-ventilated building. And I'm imagining the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, that indoor facility can get really, really hot. But there are also plenty of doors that can be opened, large doors that can be opened. And sometimes when we're in there, they don't always like to, they're practicing in the spring and in the fall. They want it to be as warm as possible to get players ready for the September heat. Now it's more about let's keep the air moving, try to be as, I'd say, windy as possible on the inside. And so that's one of the big things, because there will probably be some rain when they're trying to practice, and maybe, who knows, maybe it'll be better to practice out in the rain now. And what happens when it gets a little colder, we'll see. But then obviously all of the usual sanitization, hand washing, and everything that was on the Buckeye Pledge is still in effect. None of that has been like, we don't need to do that anymore. All of that still needs to continue.
Yeah, reading through that document from the NCAA, I kept thinking, like, this all sounds like stuff Ohio State has been doing for the most part for quite a while. And from what we know, the infection rate in the football program has been pretty low. They haven't come out and given a number. Oklahoma came out this week and said 0 players have tested positive. Michigan, I think, had 2 or something like that. And Ohio State has not released their number. But from everything that sources have been telling members, the number is sort of low, probably low single digit kind of number. So that has to be encouraging. If Ohio State is taking these kind of steps and it's working for the most part, then that has to be sort of encouraging. Now, worth noting, they're not practicing yet, but when they do, they have multiple practice fields. They have, I think, two turf fields and 2 grass fields out there. I mean, so you can really spread out and work exclusively outdoors, which should help. But we were talking before we hit record, and there's, I think, a pretty good chance that Ohio State is not just meeting, but exceeding these guidelines in probably a lot of cases.
Yeah, the recommendations during practicing are to test 25 to 50% of your team every 2 weeks. I would assume Ohio State is doing more than that, and they've done more than that ever since the pandemic hit, even in terms of scholarship players, keeping the players from the spring sports on scholarship if they want to come back, to so far not cutting any sports, not cutting any salaries, trying to keep everything as normal as possible. And we know not every school is able to do that. So when it comes to Ohio State and dealing with COVID-19, they're doing, I guess you could say, above and beyond. And as you said, when you're reading through all of this stuff, it's like, well, what is new here? Because this is all stuff that Ohio State has already been telling us they're doing. And I always go back to when we were there for the first sort of check-in day for workouts, and we were there for 7 or 8 hours, and we kept seeing somebody cleaning the door handle and every hour or so. And we were told it's the cleanest building in America, and they're doing everything they can to make sure this season happens. And if it just requires a little bit more elbow grease, I don't think that's a problem at Ohio State.
Another thing, if you're looking for optimism, and I think we all are at this point, the NCAA's document also laid out, hey, the first couple weeks after people return to campus is going to be really a time to watch closely, because you got people coming from all over the place. You've got, people coming from potentially all 50 states. You've got, people traveling and all of that. So that's sort of a real danger time. For the Ohio State football program, they're already out of that. That has already happened. Guys have come in. They're all back in Columbus now. They're all, they're practicing. They should not be traveling again. So, if there's the larger student body comes in, then that'll be a concern at Ohio State, obviously. But, the football players are all sort of back in the bubble, so to speak. So that is another kind of positive indication. There was something in there about face coverings and face shields, which not just, cloth masks or gaiters or, something like that, but actually companies have developed sort of larger versions of those face visors. So, you the old picture of Andy Katzenmoyer with the face visor over his eyes. But these go all the way down to the bottom of the face. If you ever played hockey and you had the clear plastic face shield, probably something along those lines. That's something that could help as well. They talked about guys wearing face coverings as soon as they come off the field, like you said, and even recommended coaches use electronic whistles, because when you blow in a whistle, you're expelling air very quickly. And I read through all of that, and I kept thinking, the lengths that they're going to, like, it is like every possible failure point they're trying to identify and eliminate as best they can. The lengths that they're going to has to sort of be encouraging, right? I mean, it's impossible to read that and come away with the idea that getting a season in somehow in the safest way possible is right near the top of their priority list.
Yeah, I read that, and the first thing was, I want an electronic whistle. I want one of those. But just the amount of meetings and time that are going into getting to each point, getting to this list of things, there's so much time and effort being put into making sure that all of this happens, which tells you how important it is that it does happen. And that gives me hope that this season isn't something that will go away because of fervor or anything like that. It's going to come down to, you know, the results, literally the results on the field in terms of, or off the field with test results, and how the student athletes are being treated, how they are doing, how are they handling everything. And it's really easy to monitor all of that compared to monitoring, the what's going on outside of those bubbles around the country. This is self-contained, and I think that makes it easier. It makes it more possible to continue on. It doesn't make it easy by any stretch, but it does allow you to keep some things in isolation. And I know they're big on tracing things backwards, and now they've laid out some guidelines for, resuming activities after a positive test, which goes to tell you that they expect positive tests, and positive tests won't end things. A considerable number of positive tests obviously would. They haven't given those numbers out yet, and that's one thing I'm still waiting on. Like, what is too many? Is 7 too many? We know Ohio State 4 in the quarterback room. That's too many because they only have 4 quarterbacks basically. But like, so what is a number on a team then that is considered an outbreak and eliminates them from competition for 2 weeks or whatever?
Well, you mentioned the quarterbacks there. Before we let you go, I did want to talk a little actual football as well. You just started releasing your positional previews at BuckeyeScoop.com this week. And the first one is about the quarterbacks, and it sounds like Ohio State might have a decent one this year. Is that true?
Yeah, there's this kid, Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm.
He was freshman at Georgia a couple years ago. Then you may have seen him play a little bit for the Buckeyes last year. Probably going to be. I keep saying he's probably going to be the best quarterback in Ohio State history, and what we saw last year, I think, was a pretty good indication of that. The real question then is the 2 freshmen behind him, C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller. Can they push Gunnar Hoke? And without having spring ball, that's going to be tough. Gunnar Hoke, with this COVID situation, you've got to prepare a backup quarterback in the likelihood that you might lose a starter. So I don't know how much competition they can have there, where they're probably, I would think that Gunnar Hoke begins camp getting number 2 reps, and it's going to be up to one of the freshmen to show that they should maybe get some looks there, because you've got to prepare like you might lose somebody. And I think Mark Givler and I were talking about this on the phone the other day. You might not want to have all 4 quarterbacks in the same quarterback room, with Corey Dennis, quarterback's coach. It might be a situation where you have the 1 and the 4 in one room and the 2 and the 3 in another room, because if there's a breakout in the quarterback room, you're not going to be in a good situation. So there's all sorts of little considerations that I would assume Ohio State is taking into account, and you wonder just how far you have to take it inside those tiny bubbles, because the NCAA is recommending that players, one group practice against another group, and they just stay practicing against that group. Like, one group of linebackers practices against one group of tight ends or running backs, and so that even inside these bubbles, there are bubbles to eliminate the spread. And even in a room with maybe 6 or 7 quarterbacks and a quarterback coach and an assistant and maybe a grad, I mean, that's 10 players. That's 10 people right there. Maybe you have to cut that in half just to eliminate the possibility that you might lose all of your quarterbacks. And that could go for any position.
Yeah. And again, this is something that the easy answer here would just be, well, this is going to be too complicated. And no one is saying that. No one is saying this is going to be too complicated. They are working very hard to figure out a way to make all of this work, which tells you are not the only one that is hoping there is a college football season this fall. The players want it. The coaches want it. The athletic directors of the nation really, really, really want a college football season that will make their lives a lot more pleasant than if there is not one. So, Tony, thank you for joining us. You can find Tony's previews on the quarterbacks, as well as one that just dropped yesterday on the safeties at BuckeyeScoop.com. He's releasing one of those a day during the week. Those are free to read, whether you're a member or not, so please go check those out. But please also consider becoming a member of the site as well. We had an incredible day of content on Thursday. We had an all-day chat with a recruiting guru, Bill Green. Chalk Talk Chat with Ross Fulton, who's our X's and O's guys, a pair of major scoops from Nevada Buck about both Ohio State football and basketball. And that was just a random day in mid-July. So you can only imagine what things are going to be like pretty soon when things start firing up for football season, which sounds like it could be just a few weeks away. So you can sign up now at buckeyescoop.com, give it a month, and this is basically the price of a lousy chain store pizza, and you get access to absolutely everything for a month. So give it a try. And just remember, whether you're a subscriber or not, you can find all of the great podcasts from Buckeye Scoop on Apple, Google, or Spotify. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of our shows. Make sure you subscribe and leave us a rating and review as well. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you Monday.